I would say
And
alcohol is the worst drug, in my opinion, and I've tried a lot of drugs.
Aye, please go for it.
Oh no, I can't do it. Give it back. Give it back.
No, you're gonna love this.
I got this freaking.
Aye, go for it.
No, I can't do it. I can't do it.
Look at the neck of you.
I can't.
I mean, that was me the whole way through drinking alcohol. I never thought that I had a problem. If anyone had said to me, like, "Why are you doing it?" I'd be like, "'Cause I just like going out and having fun." From the age of 15, 16, I would have been drunk every weekend until the age of 30, easily.
all right, guys, we have Charlotte Jackson here today. She is a recovering meth addict, and she overcame her addiction with her own mindset. Charlotte, can you give us a little bit of a background on you?
Yeah, of course. So I'm English and live in the UK at the moment, but I lived in Australia for 10 years. And over there, crystal meth is a massive thing. It's called ice, actually. And it's a huge problem in Australia that a lot of people are addicted to it. And yeah, basically, after going through a breakup with my fiance, one thing led to
Mm.
another. I didn't really know how to, I guess, deal with the emotions of grief, and I'd never been taught how to deal with difficult emotions before, and just found myself jumping into a brand new relationship straight away. Discovered the world of drugs, and then before I knew it, I was like really far down the rabbit hole, smoking crystal meth every day for 3 or 4 years. Um, so yeah, it was a pretty crazy journey, but I'm out the other side now. So
And
love
you
to dive
mentioned
into it with you.
yeah, you mentioned that you never did drugs before this, not even
Yes.
really smoked a cigarette.
Yeah, so I was 29 when I broke up with my fiance, and it wasn't even that I'd never tried drugs before. I actually used to think they were disgusting. Like, I
Oh,
genuinely used to look at people that were drug addicts and think, "That is so disgusting. I can't believe that they do that. Why don't they just stop?" I think that's what I used to think, even though, I mean, it was a bit ironic because I was a massive binge drinker going out and getting blackout drunk every weekend, but in my mind, that's, like, a completely different thing, even though obviously it's not.
yeah.
So, yeah, at all. So I thought, on my high horse, I was like, "Drugs are disgusting. I would never do that. Why would anyone do that?" But yeah, went through this breakup, and I just didn't know at that time in life how to be on my own. I'd never been out of a relationship. I'd always been in relationships for
Mhm.
15 years, like just back to back boyfriends my whole life. So then when we broke up, I just dove straight into a new relationship, and that guy was a functioning cocaine addict.
Oh.
And he just, that's like what he did every weekend, like spent so much money on it, crazy amounts of money on coke every single weekend. And after a while, I think because I was in such a negative headspace and I didn't want to be alone, I just ended up joining in. Um, and one thing led to another, and then I guess you meet people and you get to know drug dealers and you get to know this whole world of people that you didn't know before. And I was just in a self-destructive headspace where I was like, I will just try anything. I don't care. Like, I tried heroin, I tried crack cocaine, but crystal
Oh.
meth was the one that stuck. Um, and yeah, that was the beginning of 4 years through addiction, which was pretty crazy.
And you said you were a binge drinker prior to this also, so binge
Yes.
drinking and doing the harder drugs.
Well, do you know the funny thing is that taking drugs stopped me drinking,
Really?
and
One
which was
drug for the
actually
next?
yeah, but it was actually amazing because when I used to drink, I was like a blackout drinker, and I could
Mm.
never, like, I would just drink and drink, and I'm sure you resonate with this as well. Just drink and drink and drink until I was could not remember what I was doing, and I'd wake up the next day feeling so horrendous, so embarrassed because I'd think, "Oh my gosh, I remember having that conversation with so and so, but what did I say?" Like, saying things that I didn't really mean, all of the shame. So when I started taking drugs, I remember one night going out And I was so much more aware of what I was doing. Like I wasn't rolling around blackout on the floor. I was just like a bit high, right? And I'm looking around at the people walking down the street who were drunk and having a good time. And I just saw all these people like falling across the street and vomiting in corners and like unable to talk and banging into each other. And I just remember looking at them going, that used to be me. And it really put me off the alcohol. Like it was like a massive wake up call. It sounds so ironic because I was always taking drugs, but I just from that moment I was never much of a drinker after that.
So you literally you looked at
I was so disgusted. I went switch from being disgusted by drugs to being disgusted by alcohol and to
that
stop
is
them around.
hilarious. And then you're just like, so you're like, ew, alcohol's disgusting. I'm just gonna like dive into this crystal meth addiction.
I think I was just so shocked at seeing what drunk people were like because normally I was so drunk, I wasn't aware of what it was like to be not drunk around people. And it was like seeing myself through someone else's eyes or like watching myself from an outside perspective. And I was just like, wow, that is actually crazy. So yeah, got completely put off the alcohol, but was heavy on the drugs.
Oh my gosh. So when did you start drinking? What age were you?
Gosh, I mean, we start pretty young in the UK, actually. I think the first time I drank would have been 11 or 12, but the first time I got drunk, maybe 14 or 15.
Okay. So
Yeah.
about the same as in the States.
Mhm.
Like people like dabble like in middle school and then they've like full force in high school.
Yeah. And I would say from the age of 15, 16, I would have been drunk every weekend until the age of 30, easily.
Wow.
Maybe I would have had 2 weekends where I wasn't, but I just didn't know any different. Yeah. And no one around me seemed to know any different either. I mean, I don't think everyone around me was getting blackout drunk as well, but everyone was drinking and it was never I think the only people that ever said to me, like, "Charlotte, what are you doing? You get so drunk," was my mum. And I just always used to think, like, "What do you know? You're my mum."
Right.
Something
Exactly.
so uncool. Like everyone does this. And meanwhile, I'm just like vomiting in a corner somewhere. Yeah, it's crazy.
It's funny because I have a similar story. My mom got like so mad at my dad for taking me out my first time getting drunk. And I was like, like, what? And then like
Yeah.
looking back, I'm like, oh, I guess she was sort of just like maybe protecting me from a
Yeah.
future self.
Yes. Yeah. Oh my goodness. I know. It is. Yeah. It's wild.
So do you feel like you coped with obviously your meth addiction, you were coping with a heartbreak, but do you think that you were dealing with like trauma of some other sorts like through those 16 to 30 years?
Yeah, in that why was I getting blackout drunk every single time I
Mm.
drank? Yeah, for sure. I think I didn't realize at the time at all because and I think this is actually quite a common thing. If you haven't experienced a trauma that is something that is super, super severe, like maybe you were sexually abused or beaten up by a parent or so like something that is just like so obviously wrong. Maybe you were more emotionally abused or you had emotionally avoidant parents or like something that is not so in your face. It's still trauma and it still
Mhm.
really affects us and really can mess us up. But because it's not so obvious, I think unless you're aware that that actually is trauma, you don't even sometimes realize that you're suffering. And the people around you, especially if you have grown up with, parents who might be absent or it could, I mean, it could be anything. But if you do maybe act upset or act as if there's something wrong, you're kind of told that nothing is wrong. And so
Mhm.
you're sort of trying to navigate these feelings, but everyone around you is like, "Oh, for goodness sake, just sort of sort
Yeah.
yourself out." And you're
Yep.
thinking, "But I'm feeling this deep emotional pain." And they're just kinda like, "Well, grow up." You know? So, I
Right?
think, yeah, so I would say yes, but there wasn't anything major. Like, I didn't in terms of all trauma is what's the
Trauma.
word I'm looking for? Yeah, it's, your pain is relative. So
Yeah.
whatever you experience, like your levels, it doesn't really matter if you're experiencing something and it hurts you, it hurts. But yeah, nothing that I could say, oh, this specific event. It was kind of just like growing up. I think.
Well, and I feel like for those of us, because I can relate to a lot, like
Mhm.
there was, no like, sexual or physical abuse, but
Mhm.
I can really relate to the emotional part of it. And I think that we don't realize that until we're older and then we have kids of our own or
Mhm.
we get sober and we're like, oh my gosh, like I never knew how to deal with my emotions because now I'm sober and I have to deal with my emotions.
Yeah, and I think I
It's so
actually
hard.
really struggled with that when I was in addiction because I used to come across people who had gone through the most crazy things that you could even imagine. Like, I met someone who his parents were in a murder-suicide and, just, like,
Mm.
things that you just could not even imagine experiencing, and I sometimes used to think, like, "Who am I to be an addict? Like, what
Right?
like, why is my life so bad that" like, I almost felt selfish for being in that place because I thought, "I haven't even, like, gone through that much. Why do I feel as though I'm suffering so much?" And so I had this element of guilt and almost, I guess, invalidating my own suffering because I didn't deem it as like, "Oh, I haven't suffered enough to be an
Yeah.
addict." Yeah, and I think that's
I
quite
feel like,
common actually.
yeah, I think that we kind of like, I don't know what is the word. I mean, I worked with this in counseling and it's like we go through a traumatic experience, but yet we're trying to like play it off like, well, this person's was worse than
Yes.
mine, or maybe I'm overreacting to it, or maybe I shouldn't have, been there,
Mhm.
said that, done that, like whatever.
Mm.
But in the realm of things, I feel like all of our traumas are very similar. Like my husband has PTSD from war. My
Mhm.
friend has PTSD from losing a child at 10 months old. And
Yeah.
like I have my own trauma. And they're all very different, but they're all very similar.
Yeah, and it is completely relative, and if it is something that's hurt you, that's okay, that it hurt you and to admit that it hurt you, and it doesn't need to be less or more than someone else's because it's just yours. It's like an individual thing that if it caused you pain, then it caused you pain, and that's basically the bottom line. Like, you don't need to go into this cycle of, like, beating yourself up that your experience wasn't bad enough or anything like that, and I think that is really common in a lot of addicts that there's a lot of kind of shame of even like,
Mhm.
why am I even doing this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you jumped from alcohol to, I don't want to say harder drugs, but like the controversial part of it is
Yeah.
alcohol is like one of the harder drugs to get off of.
I would say
And
alcohol is the worst drug, in my opinion, and I've tried a lot of drugs.
so you have like you've experienced them, so
Yeah,
you can
coming
definitely
from the
talk
realm of
about
experience, I'm like, I do not remember ever on any drug that I have ever taken, and I've tried pretty much all the class A drugs, having any kind of come down, anything like a hangover. Like,
really
if you
even heroin.
told even heroin, like, even
Oh,
if you told people the symptoms of someone who is drunk and, like, what they experience, and if you genuinely said to someone, like, "You could black out, you won't remember anything, you'll be slurring your words, you won't be able to walk properly, you'll be, yeah, like, not remembering anything you've said or done. You might wake up the next day and be sick. You probably won't be able to, like, eat or function the next day, da, da."
ugh,
If you, like, listed all those things, people would be like, "That is so messed up. Like, who would do that?"
yeah,
And actually everyone does it. And
yeah,
it's great. Whereas actually, I never used to feel like that when I used to take drugs. Like, I don't remember ever being that out of it where I genuinely, like, couldn't wasn't or even aware of what I was doing. And this is stuff that's sold to everyone everywhere you go. It's like, I mean,
yeah,
I honestly take my hat off to people that have had issues with alcohol because I just think, it's not as though I go out for breakfast and someone's like, "Hey, would you like a crack pipe?" It's like it's not in my face ever unless I
yeah.
was to go looking for it really. Whereas alcohol is just everywhere. Like, it is
Mm.
just so easy to access.
I
Mm.
like how you bring that up because a lot of people say, I mean, I get like 50-50 remarks on this. No, heroin's worse than alcohol, alcohol's worse than heroin. But
Mm.
in the realm of things, the stereotypical heroin addict, they're like half dead on the couch.
Mhm.
But when you're drunk, blacked out, you look half dead also.
Yes, I would say, like, on a level, to be honest, and also I find a lot of the time, and this is my own experience with alcohol as well, I was like a very aggressive person on alcohol, and I feel like it can bring out a lot of aggression in people. Generally, if when heroin addicts are high, like they're just kind of like, they're not, they're not. And even if you go to clubs where people are taking a lot of drugs, everyone is very like, oh my goodness, I love you so much, la la la, and it's all like happy and like love. Alcohol is like, I want to start a fight with you, and like
Yeah.
people being aggressive and like in each other's faces. And I think that's really interesting too. It's like, interesting that the one drug that is legal is the one that actually, like, that's how people generally tend to be on it.
Like
Yeah, very interesting.
you see in all the shows everybody fighting because they're drunk. You see all the
Mhm.
cop shows, people
Mhm.
getting in accidents, killing other people because drinking and driving,
Mhm.
and just all the bar fights. The cops called like this person got domestic violence because they were drunk. Like it's just
Mhm.
such a violent drug, and like
Yes.
people don't react. I mean, I'm not like saying go switch one drug
No,
for the
yeah.
next, but like
Go do
people
your Charlotte, go
right.
pick up some meth pipe.
But, like, I mean, they have to realize that alcohol is such a terrible drug, and I don't think a
Mm.
lot of people are seeing it as an actual drug.
No.
And you
Well,
said
also,
you
it's marketed as
yeah,
not a drug. It's like, if you even look at what we're told about drugs in relation to alcohol, it's like, I mean, not so much now, but a while ago, they used to have adverts on TV about drugs that was like, one hit is all it takes. Like, it'll fry your brain like an egg, all these things, which is actually not true. But then on the flip side, they're like, have a drink. Like, it's a birthday, have a
yeah,
drink. A wedding, have a drink. Oh, yeah. And and the adverts are
right.
all like, yeah, yeah. They're never like, if you
It'll
touch
tickle
this,
your
you
brain.
will. They never. There's no, yeah, but I mean, then also it's taxed, and there's like money involved too. So that's a whole nother rabbit hole we could go down.
Yeah, it's a billion-dollar industry,
Yes, exactly.
and that's what a lot of people say, like, well, they're not gonna, take alcohol off the market because it makes people money.
Mhm.
Like, killing us, but they did it with cigarettes. They took s I mean, they started putting warning labels on all cigarettes,
Yeah, yeah.
and, I mean,
It's
it's
so
just
interesting. I sometimes see the adverts go past me on buses for vapes, and it's like, oh,
yeah.
this new fresh vape, and like it's come out, blah blah. And I look at it, and it's like I almost am transported in time, and I think, I know that in, say, like 50 years from now, people are gonna say what we say about cigarettes and be like, "Can you believe that they used to advertise that?"
Right?
Like, can you believe it? Like, that's what we think about cigarettes now. We're like, "How weird that they used to be like, yeah, woo, like smoke a cigarette." That's literally what we will think about alcohol and vapes, like, in the future, and we'll think, "That is so wild that it used to be. Can you believe it?"
Exactly. I feel like,
Mm.
the book that I'm reading right now, she mentions, in 50 years, people are gonna think of alcohol just like they did cigarettes.
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
Like
I do think that there is definitely a lot less people drinking now, and you can see that people are starting to realize, and not people that have necessarily had issues with alcohol, but just people who have decided, actually, I'm going to cut down, or there's a lot of like low alcohol or no alcohol options now, and there's a market for it, which means that people are obviously wanting it. So you can see that things are going that way, but we're also still quite a long way off, I think.
yeah. So, let's get to your mindset.
Mm.
I love the people that resonate with me so much where it's just like it just clicked in my brain one day and I was done. Like,
Mhm.
I didn't have to go to rehab, didn't have to go to AA,
Mhm.
given I do have this community, which I'm very thankful for. Um,
Mhm.
like I say, like, I don't think I could have stayed sober without my YouTube community, but, um, so I'll call to, uh, meth, and then when did you quit, and how did you quit?
Um, yeah, it was interesting. So I think there's so many things that go into it. I feel like I always knew that I wasn't always going to be an addict. And even the language that I use around it is quite different. Like, I would never say I was in recovery. I say I'm recovered, and I'm like, because I'm not going back. Like, I'm
Mhm.
done.
Yeah,
But I know that
I like
that's
that.
like a term that people definitely use around addiction. And I am really careful around the words that I use with things, because I think that can kind of like bring it into fruition. Like, I used to say, "Oh yeah, I got clean," and I don't say that anymore. I always will just say I got off the drugs, or I'm drug free, because I really hate the connotation that if you're an addict, you're dirty, because then the
Yeah.
opposite is clean. So I try also not to say that as well. But yeah, for me, it was just kind of this switch in my head that clicked. And interestingly, and I've only just realized this whilst talking through with you, that moment that I had where I like saw all the people drunk and it made me go, whoa, like I'm suddenly seeing like myself. I actually had a moment like that when I was on meth and I was like journaling, and I'm an avid journaler and I always have been, and I think that really actually got me through addiction because it helped me sort through a lot of stuff. And I was journaling and I was sitting in my apartment. I'd managed to, through a series of miraculous events, divine intervention for sure, I had ended up with an apartment, and I was sitting there and I had all my stuff. I just taken it out of storage and I was just like looking around and I just had this realization. I was like, whoa, like no wonder my life looks like this. Like just horrendous when I've been treating myself so badly. And it was like I just suddenly had this realization like, whoa, like I treat myself, yeah, like just the worst person in the world. I would never treat another human being the way that I treat myself. I can't believe it. I was like, I don't look after myself. Like I don't eat. I don't like work out. I don't do anything. Like all I do is sit around like smoking drugs and hanging out with people that are not good for me and that treat me really badly and all these things. And I just suddenly have this just like aha moment. And then after that, I could actually really hear the voice in my head that was the one that had been there my whole life. That was like, I would drop something on the floor and the voice was like, "You stupid effing idiot." Like on the, and I'm thinking, whoa, like who speaks to other human beings like that? But that's the voice in my head. And I suddenly realized, oh my goodness, like this is how I've been speaking to myself my entire life. I have been telling myself I'm a stupid idiot for the tiniest little things. Everything was so negative and so critical and so nasty. And once I started to become aware of that voice, I just started to actually talk back to it. And sometimes even out loud, which I probably would have seemed really crazy if anyone had been around, but I would just stand up to it and say, no, I'm not. Like, I am not a stupid idiot. I'm actually just trying my best or doing this, whatever. I actually wrote "I love you" on my mirrors, and this was during lockdown in Australia. So I had like a lot of time on my own and a lot of time in my apartment, and I was just like walking around, and every time I would walk it around in front of a mirror, it was just like, "I love you." I'd wake up, the first thing I see would be like, "I love you, I love you." And it started to just, or I almost like brainwashed myself into believing these things that I kind of knew deep down, like I do love myself, but I'm not acting like it. Like there was like this tiny little spark inside of me that was like, yeah, like I'm here. I do love you. Like we're gonna sort this out. We're gonna fix it. Um, and just started speaking to myself so much more kindly and becoming aware of that voice. I mean, that's like a very quick summary of how it happened, but that was like the mindset shift that really occurred. And then I started to notice that the more I affirmed these things to myself, the more my life around me started to change. And the more then I would like take action that matched what I was affirming. And then then it would make it go stronger. And then by the time I was ready to come back to the UK, so I'd probably been off the drugs for about a month, I was like almost bordering on arrogant, like how much of a cheerleader I was to myself. You know, I was just like, yeah, I'm the best. Like I can do anything I put my mind to. Yeah. Um, but yeah, that's really how it happened. It was just this like realization and then the reprogramming of those negative words and thoughts and like actually catching them like when they would happen and then reframing them to something more positive, depending on what it was. So if I would say, I can't do this, instead of saying, yes, I can do it, because that's like so far apart, I would say, I'm finding this really challenging, but I'm trying my best. And then once you can accept that, then you can like move to the next, which might be like, I'm finding this really challenging, but I'm succeeding, because then you realize you're succeeding. And then you just keep building on it until you get to, I can do it, rather than like from here, like right up to the top. You just like take little steps until the thing that you're affirming actually becomes true.
Well, it's so funny. This just came to my mind. In school, or at least when I was in elementary school, like our teachers would be like, "Don't say can't." Like, and as we grow older, we realize, because I listen to podcasts, we read books, and they say to write things on your mirrors, put notes all over the place, and tell yourself you love yourself every single day, or um, don't use the word can't, and it will take you to the next level.
Yeah.
Because I think that a lot of us just have such a negative mindset on ourselves, and that's a really tough place to come out of.
Yeah, and it almost, I think, seems too simple that you think, "Oh, I could just write on my mirror or, like, say this thing." That seems almost too simple that it would have an impact, but if you're walking past something every day and you're reading what it says and it says something positive, that is reprogramming your mind, and the more that you do that, the more you rewire your brain for that to be the natural state, and you start to see that when you're doing things, instead of automatically looking for the problem, you'll suddenly realize you're looking for a solution. Or
Yeah.
instead of always focusing on the negative, you realize you're focusing on the positive, and you think, oh my goodness, like I'm actually a different person because I've been doing these things.
I feel like we're too quick to pull the trigger on the negative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so going into that, you actually have a holistic coaching for women on
Yes. Yeah.
you know,
Self-confidence. Yeah.
on
Yeah.
self-confidence. And that's the thing, like
Self-confidence
a
and
lot of us,
self-worth. Yeah.
yeah, I think that's
Be-
the biggest thing that a lot of women lack. I mean, that's something that I still have to work on. I
Mhm.
mean, most
Do you know
of
what's
us,
so interesting? I was talking to a male friend of mine the other day, and we were talking about coaching, and I was talking about what I coach women on, and he was saying, he's like, "That is so important." And I was like, "Elaborate. What do you mean?" Not just like a throwaway comment, because it's interesting for a man to say that, right? And he said he works in the financial industry, and he's really aware of the gender pay gap between men and women, and he always tries to include women in things and like bring them into situations or put them forward for things like within the industry to sort of like help them get ahead, I suppose. um and he said he was like, the one thing that I always notice the difference between men and women is that men think they're so much better than they are, and women think they're so much worse. And he was like, he said men will apply for a job when they have like 60% of the qualifications. If a woman only has 90, she'll be like, "Oh no, like I don't have everything they're looking for."
ah,
And he said he goes, "I really notice it." He's like, "It's the one thing that really holds a lot of women back is this like lack of self-belief or self-assurance or self-confidence." And he was like, "It's so important because it will change your whole entire life." But I found it so interesting that from a male perspective that he had picked up on that. And I said to him, "Well, is it any wonder? Like, we're basically targeted from the day that we're born to to tell us that we're not good enough and we're not pretty enough and we need to be like this and this by advertising. We're kind of easy targets for
yeah.
advertisers." And I think it just gets drummed into us, and then it seeps into every aspect of our life. Yeah.
So how do you help women? And can you give us a success story of like a couple of women that you've helped?
So I think really it's all about uncovering the patterns. So really like uncovering the patterns of somebody who they'll come to me and be like, "I feel really lost, like I don't really know who I am," which is a massive one. A lot of the time, interestingly, post breakup, which I think is like
Mm,
it's a time when a lot of people are really rediscovering themselves, because if you're someone who validates yourself through external relationships, then you will really suffer through a breakup, because it's like when you go through a breakup, you don't have an identity because you don't know who you are and you don't feel worthy on your own. So a lot of people come there. So it's really uncovering what's going on behind the scenes, the behaviors, the patterns, the way that you talk to yourself, and working out like how that is stopping you from being who you want to be and where you want to go to. And then, yeah, just basically working out who you want to be in an ideal world, ideal situation, and shifting your programming and your beliefs and all the neural wiring so that you
mm,
can then become that person and emotionally connect with that person. And a lot of that as well has to do with your nervous system and integrating things into your body, because a lot of the time we're living in this fight or flight situation,
yeah.
and we don't even know that we are. And that can even be a reason for addiction, to be honest, because I think if you really look into the depths of addiction, what it really is a soothing of emotional pain. And people soothe their emotional pain in so many different ways. If you choose substances, then it's highly stigmatized, but a lot of people soothe their pain just by like scrolling on Instagram or watching Netflix or like having sex with people or whatever it might be. And if you can uncover that emotional pain and like what is at the actual root of that, then you're going to get really far at being able to change and transform your life.
I feel like a lot of people don't realize that they are drowning their emotions in those substances, food,
I don't think I did.
sex, shopping. Yeah, like,
Yeah.
and I don't think I did either. And then I started counseling, and it really started helping. And then I found a new counselor, and she's absolutely amazing. But she has brought up the word emotionally safe. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I never like, as women, how often do we actually feel emotionally safe in
Yeah.
our environments?" Because, yeah, maybe we're physically safe, but are we emotionally safe? And then I think a lot of us just drink to, you know, cure that emotional safety, like, and they don't
For
realize that
sure.
they're doing it.
No. And maybe that's all it is. Like maybe and that can be a whole another thing for you to delve into because you think, well, I haven't gone through this massive trauma, like nothing's actually wrong in my life. Why am I doing this or why am I acting like this? And it's because your body is completely dysregulated and you don't feel safe. Um, and yeah, you can reach for something if you're like alcohol or drugs, it's like a numbing or a soothing that you feel that, yeah, it helps to give you that kind of feeling of safety, or at least you're like numbing the feeling of unsafety.
So you mentioned that you have if we were talking a little bit about the controversial, topic.
Yeah, before we started recording, I was
Yeah.
saying I have a little controversial opinions on addiction. So I suppose, well, like I was saying, even, my wording and stuff that I use around it. And for me, I actually did before I got off the drugs. I went to a couple of NA meetings, and this is like absolutely no shade to that community whatsoever, because I think that it's so amazing. I think Alcoholics Anonymous is amazing as well, and it gives so many people strength and community when they need it. But one of the things I really never resonated with was you're powerless to your addiction. And I was like, whoa, like, hold on. Like, if I'm powerless to my addiction, then that means that like the drugs rule me. And I was like, but I have the power to stop. So I was like, so
Yeah.
that was like one thing. I was like, no, I don't really resonate with that. Like, I'm not going to give my power away to some drug. Like, the drug is neither here nor there. Like I have the power to take control of my life and do what I want with it, and I'm owning it and taking accountability, and I'm going to do it. I'm not just going to like surrender my power to a substance. So that's one thing I think that I don't I don't buy into it. I think that we're told that
Yeah.
drugs are like so evil, and if you just touch them you'll be an addict, and that's what we were talking about before. I mean, there are so many people who touch drugs and they are not addicts and they don't have problems with drugs. They like might use them recreationally once in a while and that's it. So
We call those
the
normal, like normies.
Normies. Yeah.
Like,
That's like most people, I think, right? Like most people who use like they'll just like have whatever. And yeah, I do find that interesting that we're kind of told like drugs are this thing that's like, oh my God. And then I also think, well, if we're told that, then is that the reason that some people do get addicted? Because they think once they're using it, they think, oh my goodness, how am I ever going to get out of this? Also,
mindset.
yeah, it is never portrayed on films or in television or anything, a story like mine, where I woke up one day and was like, I'm done. And then I just walked away. It's always someone who's like curled in a ball, like spewing their guts out, like clawing at the walls, like having some kind of like psychosis that it's like so dramatic, and they're always like stealing from people and doing all these like crazy things. And of course that does happen, but it's not the only side to it. But that's what's always portrayed, this crazy world that yeah, it's very strange, and it's drummed into us, I think, through television and media and all of it. And I think the controversial opinion that I have is that it's easier to get off the drugs and turn your life around than people think it is. But because we're told it's so hard, that why would you want to even try if you're told it's so hard? Yeah.
I completely agree, and I'm also on this kick of, is it genetic or is it learned? And I truly feel that it's learned
Mhm.
because, yes, maybe we have some genetic components to it because of the way
Mhm.
our brains work, but at the same and, like, the way our bodies metabolize things, like, I know that my dad metabolizes alcohol the same way I do, like, we just can't handle it that
Mhm.
that well. We act the
Mhm.
same way when we're drunk, but, um I think that growing up in these environments, and if we don't choose to change our ways, like we're
Mhm.
just going to be stuck in the addiction cycle and blame it on, well, it's genetic. I don't think, like, are you genetically addicted to porn? Are you genetically addicted to
Yeah,
shopping? Are you
exactly.
genetically addicted to caffeine? Are you
Do you
genetically
know,
addicted to working out? Like,
I
it's
think the
only
genetic
alcohol.
com yeah, I think the genetic component is actually the trauma, because they've now proven scientifically that trauma is passed down through our DNA, and if your grandparents went through something traumatic and didn't process it in whatever way
Mhm.
and, like, move it out of their body and grieve it or whatever it might have been that they went through, that gets passed on to their children in their DNA, and then that gets passed on to their children. So you could have, like, a phobia or an issue or whatever it might be that you have never had an experience for you to have that trauma, but the trauma is in your body, and then that would be a reason to go and abuse alcohol or whatever because you're holding this trauma. So it's like you've got this trauma, you need the emotional soothing, but like you don't even know why because it's not your trauma. But yeah, in terms of being like genetically disposed to addiction, I don't think so. Like I also don't agree with addictive personality either. I'm like, no, like that's not a thing. Like you could
It's a habit.
it's not a thing. Yeah, it's not a thing.
It's a habit, and I feel like it's people don't want to change. It's all about mindset, I like to
Mhm.
think, and I love that you
Yes,
brought
yeah.
that up because it really is how you control your brain, and if you want it
Mhm.
bad enough, like,
Mm.
society is gonna tell you that you're addicted and you're never gonna be cured, but, like,
Yep.
listening to so many things lately, one of the things was if doctors treated it as a disease and not just, "Well, you're never gonna not be an addict," and so they
Mhm.
don't help people enough, I don't
Mhm.
think. I think maybe it's starting to come around a little bit more, but she brought up a good point, like, they're not treating it as a disease per se to get people the help because they just feel like alcoholics are just
Mhm.
hopeless.
Yes.
They're just gonna go
Yeah.
back to it, and it's like,
Yeah.
but it's in the person, it's their mindset, like, maybe I don't know, like,
And I
there's
think they just treat it as a substance abuse problem that's like, "Oh, okay, well, if we get them off the substance." So, if you get off the substance, then that you're not an addict anymore. I mean, I do not understand how people, um, can get out of addiction through willpower alone. Like, I'm just like, hats off to you that you every day wake up and you're like, "I want it, but I won't do it." Um, I could not do that. Like, for me, it was I woke up and I was like, I'm done."
Mhm,
But that was because the drugs and the alcohol are not the problem. They're actually your solution to a problem that you're having. So if you work out what the problem is and then you solve that problem, then you don't need that solution anymore. And then you can just walk away. But if you don't solve the problem, you're always going to be like fighting that because the drug or the alcohol, whatever it is, that's the solution to the problem that you
mhm.
have. So you have to really like delve into the emotional root of why you're doing what you're doing for sure.
Oh my gosh, that's so it is literally the solution to our problem,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
we don't
Yeah.
wanna
And
figure out the
and
problem.
right. And I used to say this to people when I was an addict, and you can imagine they were like, "Yeah, of course you don't think the drugs are the problem." And I was like, "You're not listening to me." I'm like, "The drugs are not the problem." They're like, "Yeah, okay. All right then, Charlotte, like if you say so, because your whole life's like down the pan. The drugs seem to be the problem." And I'm like, "No, no, no. You don't
Oh
understand. The drugs are not the problem."
oh my gosh. So what would you say to somebody that is, like, super struggling with the addiction right now?
Hmm. I would say firstly, get really, really honest with yourself. Stop living in denial of like, no, like it's not that bad, or no, I just really enjoy the way the drugs make me feel. Like, if you are genuinely like in addiction and it's ruining your life, you're not doing it because you like how the drugs make you feel. Like, that's not that you're not just having fun. So get honest with yourself. Like, when specifically are you taking drugs or drinking? Like, notice the patterns in your behavior. Like, you don't even have to be like, right, I'm done, I'm gonna try and stop. No, like, stop. Like, don't worry about giving it up. Like, don't worry about that. Focus on, okay, what is going on here? Like, when am I reaching for the bottle? When am I like, I need that hit? Because you'll start to notice patterns in your behavior. And it's like, oh, the reason, like, every time I do it, like for me, my trigger was loneliness. And every time I felt really lonely, that's when I was like, ooh, like, I need that. It was like a lack of connection. And one of the reasons that I felt so lonely was because I didn't love myself or know myself. And when you do, like, you never feel lonely because you're so happy and content with your own company. And you obviously love being around other people as well, but you don't need other people to feel unalone. So yeah, get really honest with yourself, but just like take inventory. Like, allow yourself to witness your life and actually see what's happening, and look at it more deeply. Like, and also look at it as like, FYI, like the drugs and the alcohol, they don't have any power over you. Like, you're actually just choosing to use them to fix a problem that you have. So like, look deeper, and don't allow yourself to get swept up in the whole like narrative of like, this is forever, like I'm never going to get away from it, because it's just bullshit. It's bullshit. Like, you will get away from it, you will, but you just have to be really honest and take inventory and notice the patterns and the behaviors, and get inquisitive of like, why am I doing this? It's not just because you're just like a loser who just like wants to ruin their life. That's not the reason. There is a reason that you're doing it. Once you can discover that, that's like when the healing starts to happen, and you can actually start to take steps to walk away from it.
Wow, the denial part is huge. I think a lot of
Mhm.
us are or were in denial, and that, I mean, I can speak for a lot of people, but I won't call them out. But like, it's literally, it is denial. Like, no, Megan had the problem. I don't have a problem. I'm like,
Mm.
bullshit. Like,
Yeah.
you don't have a
I
problem.
used to
Oh my gosh.
I used to meet people when I was an addict, and we like literally like living in crack dens, and I would say to them, like, how, like, I'm in the same situation. I'm like, how did your life like get to this point? Like, what do you think it was that like got you here? And I'm like delving deep. I'm like the annoying addict who's like, let's talk about our traumas and like get in, get deep and get involved. And let's uncover stuff. And everyone's just like, what? Like, leave us alone. But I did meet a lot of people who were like, "Nah, man, like I just really like I just like it. It's like having fun." I'm like,
Yeah.
"Are you like, let's just take a look around at the moment, because you're literally sleeping on a mattress on the floor. You have like no friend." Like, I'm like, "Come on, like you're not having that much fun. Like, it's not that fun." Um, but yeah, it is interesting. But the denial piece, I mean, that was me the whole way through drinking alcohol. I never thought that I had a problem. If anyone had said to me like, "Why are you doing it?" I'd be like, "'Cause I just like going out and having fun." Okay.
It was like the only thing that we knew how to do.
Yeah.
I mean, right? Like, we grew up drinking, and like
Mhm.
that's how we processed our feelings. And then when we
Yes,
quit
yeah.
drinking, we're like, oh, I was part of the problem.
Yes.
And
Exactly.
but now when people deny their problem with alcohol, it's just like my brain just like shakes. I'm like, oh my
Mhm.
gosh, you've
Mhm.
got to take a better look at yourself and your surroundings. Like you said, like, are you losing family? Are you losing friends? Do people want to be around you like anymore?
Mm.
Like, have
Mhm.
you been cut off from so many things or uninvited to things because of your alcohol problem, and then they don't see themselves on alcohol?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I know that I wasn't necessarily pleasant all the time to be around. Like you
No,
said,
me
you were an
neither.
excessive drinker, me
Yeah.
too. But, like, I just feel like, oh my gosh, I could go on and on about this denial
Mm.
phase,
Mhm.
and I
And
think it
I think
truly
it's super important, but then in the same breath, if you are in denial, and there might even be someone who listens to this, and there's like a tiny little part in their brain that like knows they're in denial, and they're
yeah.
like, they like know, they're going, oh my goodness, I think they're actually right. But they're still a little bit like on the fence.
Yeah.
Like, no, it's fine, it's fine. But there will be a tiny little part of you that's like niggling, that's going, oh, actually, like there is something to this. But until you get to that point where you're like, oh, actually, there's something else going on here, and like I'm actually responsible for creating this, not in a shame way, like not like, oh, I'm such a horrible person and I've like ruined my life and I've ruined lives of all these people around me and da da da. Not that, because you don't want to go into a shame spiral at all. That's not helpful for anyone. But just being like, oh, my actions did actually get me here. That's okay. Like, just own it and just be like, they did, and no shame in it. Like, I was dealing with something that I didn't know how to deal with. I didn't know how to process my emotions properly or deal with it like this, or I was, learned this from the parents or whatever it might be, was in a toxic relationship. It could be any reason that you're going through it, but just like owning it and being like, okay, well, that pain actually probably isn't my fault, but it is my responsibility to now take ownership and sort it out. But until you get to that point, like, you can't actually change your life, because if you're in denial, like, you'll never want to turn things around because you don't think that's a problem.
Well, and then I feel like some people just stay in denial and realize, like, maybe because they haven't hit rock bottom, like
Mm.
the
Mhm.
stereotypical rock bottom. I mean, all of us, our rock bottoms look way different. I
Yeah,
mean, not all of them are under the bridge with a paper bag full of whiskey. I
exactly.
mean, everybody's rock bottom is different, and that's when you
Mhm.
decide that you want to, like, get out of that denial
Mm.
and push forward and
Yeah, and
solve your
perhaps
own
it's
freaking problem.
actually the addiction that isn't the, like, paper bag under a bridge, like, that might even be harder to get out of because it's so much more subtle, and maybe you're functioning on the surface, but deep down, things aren't right. Um, for me, like, I wasn't living on the street, but I became homeless, like, through addiction, and I lived in crack dens and all these things, and so it was very obvious to me where I was like, "Whoa, like, my life is not doing too well right now." If I had been holding down a job the whole time, like, maybe I would have been in denial for a lot longer. Um,
So, sorry, you were homeless.
yeah, but I was living in my car, so, and it's funny actually. I think the one thing that addiction really, really taught me is that I believe that people are inherently good, and I came across so many people who were so kind, and like strangers who would help me for absolutely no reason. Like, they would not get anything out of helping me, and they would. So technically, I was homeless for 2 years, but in those 2 years, I spent 2 years 2 years, 2 weeks without somewhere to live, and the rest of the time, people were like, "You can stay here, you can come here," whatever, and then, like I said, I ended up in crack dens, but I always seemed to have a roof over my head, and I was like, "Wow, there's definitely someone looking out for me here," because it was just wild how these people would pop up into my life out of nowhere and be like, "Oh my goodness, like, you're struggling, that's fine, I'll help you," and I wasn't lying to them, like, I was like, "I'm a drug addict," and they're just like, "That's fine, like, come move into my house," thinking, "Okay." What? Do you not know about the stigma around addiction? You don't think I'm gonna come and, like, steal all your stuff? Not that I did, but I'm just saying, like, you're very trusting. But yeah,
Yeah.
people are good. That's, one thing I learned. But yeah, my rock bottom was, like, very obvious. But the first 2 years of addiction, I lost my job quite at this, like, near the start of it. And because of that, I started cleaning houses as a way just to make money. And then before I knew it, I ended up having this really big client base. And then someone that I met who was actually another addict was like, "Why don't you turn it into a business?" And I was like, "I never would have thought of doing that." So I turned it into a business. I ended up getting a lot of Airbnb contracts and basically, like, outsourced all the cleaning. I had 11 people working for me, and I was just at home
Wow.
basically, like, getting high and just, like, sending people out to all these jobs. So then, like, when that was happening, I mean, if that had carried on for longer and I'd managed to keep control of that, like, I probably would have stayed on the drugs for a lot longer than I did. But because then I lost control of it and, like, everything came crashing down to such a rock bottom, it's like, well, I know what my life could be, and it's such a stark contrast. Whereas I think, yeah, I think if you're like a functioning addict, it would be a lot easier to stay in denial because you're like, "No, on the outside, my life looks fine, so, like, I don't have a
You're
problem."
running a business being, like, a full-on
Yeah.
addict.
Yeah, it's wild.
But you
Um,
lost it.
yeah, because I think that you can't keep a handle on everything in your life when you're an addict. Like, something has to give. You are going through like mass emotional turmoil a lot of the time. And generally, when that happens, like the relationships that you're having are also probably in turmoil too. For me, I was experiencing like a lot of toxic relationships with men as well. So that like combined with like addiction, like all of the things, like there's just no way that you're going to keep maintaining a business unless you're some kind of like superhuman. There are people that do, but for me, I was like, I'm done. Like, I can't do it all. And something had to give. And unfortunately, it wasn't the drugs, it was the business. So yeah, that was like the beginning, I guess, of the descent, like out of addiction. But in a way,
So
it's good it happened.
was this all in Australia?
Yeah.
And then when did you move home? I'm assuming the UK is home.
Yeah. So I think I got off the drugs in September 2020, and then I came back to the UK October 2020.
Wait,
So
Australia let you out during 2020?
everyone again, this is what I'm saying, it was so wild because everyone was like, there is no way that you are getting out. They're like, and I was in Melbourne, which had the strictest of all the lockdowns. I think it was the longest.
We heard about Australia.
I know. It was like it was like the longest lockdown outside of China or something. And I was just like, this is wild. Like, I am leaving. And everyone was like, you are not going anywhere. I was like, watch me. I am
Will
getting
soon
out, I am getting out of here. I still don't quite know how I managed to make it happen, but I was just like, I think sometimes when people say to me, like, you can't do that, I'm like, yeah, okay, just watch me. Cause like just because you believe like something to be true, or just because the general like masses say, oh, you're not going to be able to do that, I was like, why not? Like, I'm going to. So yeah, so I did get out it was literally in the middle of lockdown, although I think lockdown ended the day that I flew. I flew back.
really?
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow, the timing. I've been in lockdown
Wow.
for so long. But actually, it is I mean, COVID actually had a lot to do with me like getting off the drugs.
Which is
Because
opposite for a lot of
yeah, like some people it made it worse, I think.
yeah.
For me, it was like suddenly I was there going, stay home, and I was locked in a crack den. So I'm like, well, I don't want to be here. Like, this place isn't enjoyable or safe. I have no distractions. Um, I was really forced to, I guess, face up to my life and like where it was at. Um, but then also I went to a homeless shelter, and I basically was just like, I'm done with my life. Like, it's just like, very honest. I'm a drug addict. I'm living in this crack den. It's horrible, and I want to turn things around, but I just don't really know where to start. And it was just one miracle after another, because they basically just said to me, oh, because of COVID, we can't put you in a shelter. We have to put you in a 4-star hotel. So
Oh.
they put me, yeah, shame. So they moved me into this hotel. And then when I was there, one of the support workers rang me and they're like, oh, hey, Charlotte, just to let you know, um, that the government is allowing people to take their pensions out early because of COVID. So if you want, like, you have access up to $10,000. And I was like, okay. So I took that out and then I used that money to get an apartment. And then that was like when I managed to sort everything out, because I kind of knew. And I actually I had a friend who passed away like just before all of this happened, like, as in he knew me through addiction, but he passed away, I think it was like a
From
year
addiction?
before. No, although he was like a party boy, um, but I wouldn't say he was an addict. But I think he just put a lot of strain on his heart from like partying on weekends and then exercising a lot and all of these things in one. It was like, yeah, probably not the best lifestyle. But yeah, he passed away about a year before I got off the drugs, and he was like one of my like biggest supporters, and was always just like, like, you could 100% turn your life around. And he was so supportive. He never and this is a big one, I think, when you're an addict, it's like no one listens to you because they just think that because you're an addict, like, you don't know what you're talking about. And he always really listened to me, and he was just like, what is it that you need? Like, what do you need to get off the drugs? And I said to him, I just need like a safe place to live and to not have to worry about money for like 2 or 3 months. And I was like, if I had that, like I would sort it out. And anyway, he was like, okay, cool, like come over, we'll have a chat about it and work out how we can achieve that. And then he died and I never actually saw him. And it wasn't until recently that I realized like that's what I ended up having. And that like when I was sitting in that apartment and then I had this money in the bank and I was like, oh my goodness, like that's literally what I told him that I needed, and that's what I've ended up with. And then that's how like that's
Holy
when
moly.
everything turned around. And the day before I went to the homeless shelter, I had walked past the church where his funeral was at, and I was just like on my knees in front of the church, like, oh my goodness, like I just miss you so much and I don't know what to do. And then the next day I woke up with this idea of like go to the homeless shelter, and then everything was just like boom, 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 like straight after that, just all like fell into alignment and worked. So it was a
Wow.
really beautiful synchronistic story of how if you just take one step in the right direction, like doors can open if that's the way that you're meant to go.
Wow, that's deep. So, and then now you're here helping others,
Yes.
and that probably fills your tank as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think when I first got back from Australia, I wanted to help everyone because I was like, oh my goodness, I felt like I've discovered the key to life. Like you can do whatever you set your mind to, and I just want to
Yeah.
help everyone. But I wasn't really in the place. Like, so I've been back for 4 years now, and it took a while for me to be like, okay, like actually, I'm ready. I needed time to like reintegrate with my family. And that was like a big one too. I moved back in with my parents. And I lived with them for a couple of years, and we were in lockdown together as well, which is like, if you have like any issues, like they're coming up. So we worked through a lot of stuff and during lockdown. That, like everyone's getting triggered left, right, and center. Me triggering them triggering me.
Yeah.
But it was actually like so healing, and I have such a good relationship with them now. We're really, really close, which I didn't have with them before. So that's beautiful. So I needed to do all of that, and even just like go and get a job that was like a 9 to 5, like working in the community and like meeting people and just living like regular life. Before then, I was ready to be like, okay, cool, let's get back to business. Like I'm
Yeah.
ready to work for myself again, and I'm ready to save the freaking world.
Which you are. So you have a presence online. And what does your programs look like?
So I don't do programs at the moment. I
Cool.
just do one-on-one coaching. So it's really just a case of connecting and making sure that we're aligned both ways, because it's so important that if you decide to work with a coach, that it's someone that you feel safe with and that you really trust. And it's really important to have a call that's like not a paid call, that you can just sit down and talk and just feel the energy and feel like, do I feel like this person can support me through whatever it is that I'm going through? And if they can get me from here to here, and you'll just know. And there's no, like if I ever speak to someone and that doesn't feel like what's there, like that's okay, because there's 100% a coach out there that's for them. It's more important to me that people like find someone that just they really, really resonate with, and that they just think, wow, yeah, like this is like a soul connection where you just feel like immediately just that beautiful
Yeah.
connection. So that's the thing that's most important to me. And then it's really just working out. Each person is slightly different, obviously, so it's not like a step by step, but there are certain pillars that I work through with each person, and I treat people holistically. So I'm not just looking at like what's going on in your mind and that's it. It's like what's going on in your mind, what's going on in your body, and what's going on like with your spirit, like how spiritually connected are you as well, because I think that is super important too, to have like mind, body, and soul just in alignment. So it's like a whole, hence the holistic
Yeah.
transformation, rather than just like focusing on one thing and like ignoring the others.
Wow.
Mhm.
And where can they find you? On your
So
Instagram?
Instagram, I am Charlotte Jackson.
I am Charlotte Jackson, not the
Yeah,
other Charlotte
not
Jackson.
not a Sky Sports presenter.
Oh my gosh. That's hilarious. So I assume you're not married to a football player either?
No, that's not me. Just for context here, there is a famous Charlotte Jackson in the UK who is a Sky Sports. I don't know if she still. I think she still is a Sky Sports presenter who I guess just learned is married to a footballer. But that's not me. No. And we were joking about before we started recording, if the other Charlotte Jackson ever gets asked about her crystal meth addiction and wonders where this information came from.
Oh, that is so awesome. Um, oh my gosh, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing, and because not a lot of people, like, leave alcohol for drugs and then never go back to alcohol, like, usually
Mm.
it's just, like, hand in hand,
Yes, yeah, yeah.
but opening up your eyes to, like, the drunk people walking on the street, I mean, seeing drunk people in a
Yeah.
sober vision it's disgusting. I mean,
I
I've
know
been to concerts and I see people, I'm like, "Oh, that was me." Like,
Mhm.
no.
That is literally just what I thought. I just felt this, like, deep embarrassment where I just thought, "I can't believe I was doing that and I never knew." It was more that I
Yeah.
just never knew. I was like, "I can't believe I never knew that's what I was doing this whole time." When it
Oh
was
my
right
god.
in my face.
But, I mean, you traded one addiction for the next, but then now you're healed and you're
Yes.
helping others.
Yeah, yeah,
I
and
love it.
I would never ever change that experience for the world. Like, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. So,
Yeah.
if you are
Well, it
going
made you
through
peace.
it yeah, if you are going through it, it's like the other side, it's worth it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I wish more people would realize that, like,
Mm.
there is better life out there
Yeah,
than being
definitely.
in addiction.
Mhm. Yeah.
Oh my
And
gosh.
it can be a bit scary to walk away. I think one of the things that I actually was worried about when I was like, "Oh, I really would love to leave this world," was that in addiction, it was the first time I'd ever felt a sense of community. And I was really worried, like, when I left, that I would feel,
Yeah.
again, that, like, sense of loneliness that I said was my trigger. And I was like, I don't want to, like, leave this, like, community," which even though it was, like, a pretty messed up community, but we were connected and had
Yeah.
each other's backs in a weird way and I had never experienced that before in my life, and I was kind of just like, "Oh, I don't know if I can walk away from this," but then now that I have, I'm like, "Oh," it's like do you know what? It reminds me of that movie Pleasantville, where, like, addiction is, like, the black and white, and then as you come out of addiction, everything just starts to become so much more colorful, and it's, like, it's so beautiful. Yeah.
It's very true. I
Mhm.
really appreciate you coming on, and,
Thank
we'll
you.
put your information in the description below
Yeah,
so people can come
amazing.
find you, and I can't thank you enough for sharing your story.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been so lovely to connect with you.